Hello, my name is Matt Mund. I am the CEO here at Total Brain, and I am delighted to be here with Total Brain's Chief Medical Officer, Dr.Evian Gordon, to talk about his new book titled The Brain, From Knowing to Doing. Hi, Evian. Great to see you here today.
Good morning, Matt. Good to see you.
So first, Evian, I want to start out by congratulating you on the launch of your second book. Your ability to take decades of science and distill it into concise and actionable content is not only what makes this book a fascinating read, but it is the foundation of the Total Brain platform. So I'd love to dig in and learn a bit more. So my first question to you is if you could tell us about the brain from knowing to doing and what prompted you to author this book.
Well, Matt, it began a long time ago. The seminal origins of this. I was, as you know, I was born in South Africa before I immigrated to Australia and then the United States. And I had the great fortune, as I was going through my science and medical studies, to have as my PhD supervisor, Professor Philip Tobias, the man who oversaw the fossils of the findings in Southern Africa. And this finding here is the woman who changed my life, Ms. Ples, who is the first fossil they found that is the link between apes and humans, and that we've trebled in size in the last 5 million years. And I was finishing my PhD in serum lipids in the heart, and when he showed me this fossil, and I thought of the implications of that, and living in an apartheid country that just made no sense to me at all, let alone that the astonishing disconnection that the cradle of humankind, which my PhD supervisor Philip Tobias then founded, where Ms. Ples was found. Ms. Ples stands for Plesianthropus, which means southern ape. How ironic that in the country where we all come from, or the area where we all come from, we have this kind of abomination of human behavior. And so I felt that there was something really fundamentally, structurally wrong in the brain that I just didn't get. And I switched very quickly after my PhD from the heart to the brain with a very simple question. Could I set up a standardized international database that could just help shed some light, a few drops of water, into this understanding of this anomaly between our, whatever it was, in those days, I thought of it as the unconscious brain, and the brain, the facade, the veneer, the masks, the veils that seem to be the way we live our lives. And that was really the origin, Matt, and that was the reason I founded Total Brain and set up the world's first standardized integrative database. So the essence of the book is really just, and it's deliberately a short book. The numerous other books that I've published are quite sciencey and sort of complex in a way. This is an attempt to distill at the age of 70, I turn 70 tomorrow, is what is the real takeaways from this? And the real one in the first chapter called, it's from knowing to doing. So the first chapter is knowing, the second doing, the third is about integrative wisdom. In the knowing is that until you align your non-conscious emotion and your conscious rational thinking, you're pretty much walking around in the dark. And that to me was the beginning of my journey of trying to better understand and better develop, products and courses and podcasts that could help us understand that piece. The second chapter, Matt, is on doing, because the biggest gap is between knowing and doing. And so what I did there was summarize over many years the literature on why is it so hard for people to change. And there's these thousands and thousands of books, courses, apps, and yet people struggle to rewire their brain. And of course, I hope that we'll talk a little bit about Total Brain, but that's the basis, of Total Brain. Bring all that stuff together. And I suppose this, Matt, is a bit of a deeper dive into the details of the how and why it is so critical to have a plan. And this was just my 3-step plan, but that's just my distillation after 40 years, and I spell that out. And I try to make explicit, as I do in the book and will be doing in the further podcasts about the book, how the hell do we get across that bridge? For real. What are the small steps? And how do we rewire them? And why is it so hard? Why is change such a threat to our safety and our stability and our comfort? And I suppose there are other things, Matt, that as an applied integrative neuroscience, as you know, the basics of why integration is not so easy is that people, silos win. People want simple stuff. They want a pill. They want a simple product that can show me one thing that scales and you'll see your share price with a telescope. No, that's never been what we're about. It's what are the deep underlying insights that are lost in the noise. And so one example, Matt, was this marvelous man, Herbert Benson, a Harvard cardiologist who studied meditation, but he demystified that it doesn't need to be religious. It can be if you associate it with, or secular, any repetition technique, whether it's breath, movement, mindfulness, mantra, music, all generate this incredibly common mechanism to bring you into a state of calm and enhanced focus. So they are the sorts of principles, Matt, that I focus on. And I end off with, of course, I have no illusions, and I make this quite explicit in the book about my own level of integrative wisdom. But I do believe that everybody is on a brain journey, whether they like it or not. They are, from birth to death. How they wire their brain, what emotion, rational thinking, convergence they find, the knowledge they seek, the experience they have, and above all, Matt, the context they bring. Do they challenge their confirmation biases, or are they just clinging to the mask, the role, the veil, the vested interest of the anger, lust, greed, self-serving, them, us, ground zero state that I saw when I was born and lived my early days in South Africa, and have seen bedeviling the world. And there's no unique solution to this. But the summary is this, Matt. The biggest gap is between knowing and doing. So these are the takeaways. Until you align your non-conscious brain with your rational thinking, good luck. You can rewire your brain, but you would like maybe to consider doing that with a plan and details about the how, not just should lists. And lastly, on our own, we cannot change the world, but we can change ourselves. And that will change the world. Why? Because positive change is contagious, just as contagious as toxic PR. And that, my dear friend and colleague and wonderful leader, is all I got.
Thank you, Evian. I had never heard a little bit about that origin story, so it's really fascinating for me. And you and I have spent so much time together, but that really put some things in place for me. And I don't love the reasoning and what generated your interest in this, but I'm fascinated to hear the story, of course, and then of course we're here together having this conversation. On the first, one of the first key points you talked about, walking, being in the dark. You talk about this concept of aligning non-conscious emotion with conscious rational thinking. I feel like lots of times I'm walking through in the dark, and I'm sure many people do. But maybe you could dig in a little bit more and explain that concept a bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it would appear from the data in our early days at the Brain Dynamics Center at Westmead Hospital, and working with the Human Brain Project in Washington, and with people in London, Jeffrey Gray in particular, in London at the Institute of Psychiatry. We really, but frankly, from the marketing industry, to be honest, is where I drew my biggest insights, which is if you look at marketing, there is something going on in terms of the way we can nudge people almost unconsciously. I call it the non-conscious, because it's not unconscious. We're actually aware of it. So that's a different part that I spell out in more detail. But there's something going on whereby this enormous gap between what people say and what they do, but also our ability to influence people for good and for bad. And in marketing, in my view, it's for bad, obviously, in my view. And they know what they're doing. They are pushing a button that is happening in our brain so fast that we do not even understand it. And that is the non-conscious brain. And it is essentially, we call it our emotions, but it should just be called intuition. It doesn't matter what we call it. In a fifth of a second, 1/5 of 1 second, we are nudging and being nudged into very fundamental ways of thinking and behaving. And if we do not align that emotion, intuition, and the biases that come with that, the biases, 100 over 100 biases, with the delusion in our Western culture that rational thinking is what drives us. It can drive us, it should drive us, but it is constantly being hijacked by these unconscious drives that can be very helpful, like intuition, but they can also be very misleading, like them-us biases. And so bringing that together, and our confirmation bias, I want to add that, Matt, because that is the most crucial of all, because that is where we can challenge these polarizations of left-right politics and of all the things that hijack us constantly. So, but when we start to be aware of that and then slowly begin to explore ways to lift the mask and the role and the veil and start to look at under the hood, how can we bring that together and how can we be a little more thoughtful about the implications of that for ourselves? Because it's all an inside job. How we are inside is the way other people are going to treat us, the impact we're going to have on others. Yeah. We are not victims by any stretch of the imagination, other than when there is obvious physical violence and really extreme, which happens, like in South Africa, like happens like in many parts of the United States. It happens all over the world. But they are not the norm. And so that is the bridging that gap, Matt, to me is the deepest part of the brain conundrum that I've been obsessed with for the last 40 years.
I mean, just one quick comment. You talk about those fifth of a second. We've always talked a lot about safety first, and it seems like that's whether your biases or confirmation biases or any of the others, is safety first one of those primary visceral caveman reactions that sort of drives a lot of that?
Yeah, and of course, safety is very important. It's the most organizing principle in the brain. So it's sort of very integrally related to that for sure. That's the basis of it. At all these emotions, biases, and intuitions subserve safety. Why? Yeah. Because we need a snapshot. We need a rapid snapshot to get us what we need immediately and to keep us safe. So they're all driven by safety. Yeah. But the problem is that fear is useful to us to keep us safe, but it can also prevent us from finding our authentic self.
Yeah, we all have a bear to run from in one way or another. You talk a lot about, obviously your book is broken into these 3 chapters. I think you've given a great overview of some of the key takeaways that you have up on the screen, but I'd be curious if you could tell us how you move from knowing to doing. Like give me a little bit of a lesson about how to bring this into real life. And so a little bit about that, I think, would be fascinating to see how the author of this is applying it.
Well, yeah, I mean, my biased example is, of course, our company and our journey that we've all shared together. That's been such an amazing confluence of events. And I'm just profoundly grateful, Matt, to the way you have brought together these pieces into Total Brain at a level that I could only have imagined, frankly, and with a quality. And so when we bring together these pieces of knowing and doing and all these tools, over 50 tools in Total Brain, and it's like companies and hundreds of clinicians and 1.5 million users, and drawing upon these core insights from the database that I set up and the basic tools and ideas that are shared, and just to see them manifest and brought to life in this way has been my daily inspiration. So what I do, Matt, to give you one example, is I use our tools every single morning. And I love that little feature you created, by the way, where you can just click to the right of any tool and put your preferred, your chosen pieces at the front end. So every morning you just need to pick your selected best ones. And I choose the best ones for me every week, but they seem to be similar and they revolve around presence. I would say my takeaway for my post-70th era, however long that's going to be, is not if any further glimmers of integrative wisdom occur, good luck. But it's really about presence. I've been lived a very Sisyphus life, as you know, pushing that rock uphill every day, dealing with the most amazing spectrum of challenges and sometimes horrifying opportunists, but mainly amazingly aligned people with a common goal of dropping these drops of water into the river. But what I haven't had a lot of time for, Matt, or haven't spent a lot of time for, is just sheer presence. Like the ability right now as we speak to not feel rushed. You can edit whatever you like out of it. I couldn't care. But to basically try and do justice to the moment of, I don't want to be a triumph of marketing over substance. I want to just focus on the substance and the presence of that alignment between my intuition and emotion and feelings and authenticity. I'm no longer going to be the pleaser that I was addicted to be in my own personal culture and family. It's staggering that it takes so long. I started that end of the journey about a decade ago. But in answer to your question, I take my tools, resonant breathing, the positivity tools, the focus tools, challenging my confirmation bias through Thought Challenger. And I basically train them every single day. But I'll end off with this point, Matt. They all subserve one goal. How present am I in that second? Yeah. Not by being overwhelmed by regrets of the past or fears of the future. How many of my 50,000 thoughts a day at the end of each day have I been present for? And that is the habit. That is my constant companion to some degree every day.
I love that. And I know you and I talk about this a lot, and presence is challenging. People think that they have good presence, but yet they're constantly distracted, especially today around their mobile phone, multitasking, everything around them. Even right now, I get a notification from my laptop that I got a meeting coming up in 15 minutes. It's just a constant piece. But I agree that this concept of presence allows you to be focused on in the moment, appreciate it, think it through. And all of this stuff is things that we've been talking about for several years and started to pull together your massive amount of science and integrative thinking into the Total Brain platform. And I'd like to dig in a little bit more on that relationship of what you've built in the book, what we've built together in the Total Brain platform, and how that, you've got a little bit up here on the screen, but maybe dig in a little bit more on that user's journey from knowing to doing as part of the Total Brain experience.
Yeah, sure. A lot of it, Matt, I think comes down to the same with presence. It's one thing to say you're present. You can have your mask on and be wisely sitting quietly and doing, nodding and go, oh yeah, lovely. Thank you so much for that. But it's what the intention is deep down. What is your actual intention, your emotional intention? It's not just what we do, but how we do it. So I think the thing that you and I have really been discussing at length, and nobody in the world that I know has fully cracked this, and neither have we, but we are so subserving this goal of this. Total Brain is more than just a kind of stamp collection of assessments and tools. It is about use cases, and it's about the detailed way in which you and I on this amazing development team, I've never seen a development team like this, where we are trying to align what is the specific use case in the moment. Is it stress? Do you need stress control? Or is it craving control? Are you just or do you have an addiction and do you need craving control in the moment? Or are you depressed and you've got this massive negativity bias that's magnified? So the point for me is, Matt, that you and I are struggling with is to not to have this framework, but to ensure that we engage people with a daily benefit, so they can see that we are giving them the tools to self-empower, to find the tiny granular things that work for them in the moment, each day, each week, and where they can feel a sense of self-efficacy, of control in how they rewire their brain. So I think it comes down to me, Matt, the final phase of my handover to you in particular via this book and podcasts, hopefully, with the key opinion leaders around the world that have just been marvelous to me, all of them over the years. It's about how to just deepen and sharpen that granularity, Matt, of in your moment, stress, negativity, cravings, peak performance.
Yeah.
What is it that we can do at Total Brain to sharpen, wire, track, and maintain that can help you literally choose yourself? And that is the battle that, as you and I know, where there's such a triumph of marketing over substance, there's such simplistic thinking in the brain space. The silos win 9 times out of 10. But here's the strange part, Matt, and maybe this sort of brings it all back to where I started. When I started in the brain, and it was a great privilege doing the hard stuff, don't get me wrong, but when I realized the difference between essentially an extremely sophisticated pump and a cosmos of 85 billion highly interconnected neurons and over 100 chemicals, and timing, that the timing in the brain of all of that is essential. The difference is that if you want to go silo, if you want to go triumph of marketing over substance, great. There may be some benefit in that, just like motivation. It's great. But if you want to rewire your brain, it is so granular, and it is so thoughtful, and it is so purposeful. And there is no sudden light of wisdom that is going to come to you and it's all inside you. You just got to discover it. Where is it? Where did it? Yes, there are some insights about the interconnection of the universe, maybe, but to rewire your brain is a very thoughtful, targeted experience, and the greatest joy and challenge I believe we all face. We just usually are overwhelmed by it, and nobody gives us a simple way to do it. And I'm hoping you in particular, Matt, can help people like me make that more simple. And that is kind of your superpower.
Well, you know my opinion on that. It's not me, it's we together along with the rest of the team. I can't do it. Can't do it alone. No one man. Your point about that self-discovery inside, it goes a little bit, maybe I'm overreaching, but back to presence is you have to be present for yourself to do that work.
100%.
Yeah. You've talked
that's the best. Sorry, that's the best summary of the whole book. It's all an inside job. If you don't get it right for yourself, no one's going to get it right for you.
Well, just remember, I'm going to ask you that question back at the end of it, which we're almost there, but you've talked so much about different aspects of the science and where you've been pulling from and how you've integrated it. But any key summaries around the science that has been the foundational aspects of the book and for the Total Brain platform? I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think, our chief scientist, Dr. Donna Farmer, is just a marvel, in so many ways. She has really been a companion with me along the journey of Total Brain for many years, and especially since, you joined 4 years ago. And the reality is this, that everything is driven by what is ultimately, even though there are deep intuitions about the patterns that matter, it needs to be deepened, made more believable and credible by the proof points of what is working in the moment. Not what we hope to work, what we can market, who we can sell to, the product market fit, what is actually real. So I'd say the science and the incredible work that Donna and her team and our scientific collaborators around the world in heart rate variability, brain music labs with their evidence-based approach to doing music for the brain in very granular detail. I mean, John Vitale is just masterful. All of these pieces, the science is the spear, and the tip of the spear is how to engage people to make it happen. So to me, the science is still 80%. And the engagement and the how, whilst it's the most important, is the 20% that is critical to allow people to be empowered by that. But without that spear being solid and authentic and validated and replicated and keep on iterating it, to deepen and deepen that scientific proof point insight. We are just another triumph of marketing over substance. That to me is our main differentiator.
Well, Evian, this has not just been a fascinating discussion, but been an incredibly fascinating, satisfying, and productive journey that I've had and doing this with you. So I thank you for all of that. As we sort of close up here, what's the one bit of advice for listeners that draws from your book?
I think just challenge your confirmation bias.
Yeah,
daily, every time, all day, and you
something easier that I can work on.
No. Just challenge. Just it's such fun because it's based. I mean, being curious, of course, is the same thing, but being also deeply curious about how much those early days we were talking about, how much as the great Darwin said, despite man's wonderful abilities, we still bear the indelible stamp of our lowly ancestors. And if we just look sometimes at the lowly ancestral behaviors that we sort of package up and pretend are self-righteously correct, no one has a monopoly of wisdom. And just to challenge our biases sometimes when we disagree with other people, and especially when we're close with them. So challenge your confirmation bias would be my not as simple as I know.
No,
that's all I got.
Yeah, I'll let you know how I do on it.
Thanks,
but of course, I know I'm going to do fantastic. That's my bias. Well, thank you, Evian. It's been a privilege, obviously, going on this journey with you. Incredibly proud to see this book come out with you, and very excited to be on the journey as you publish and go on your roadshow with it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt, and to the whole team. Thank you.
Great.